We're talking about what we can learn from our histories and our struggles as Latinx people, about our democracy, about this political moment right now, and about the future we want to see.
As we touched on in our countdown of the 10 reasons why Latinx people need to vote this upcoming election, we are in a moment that is critical in setting the stage for a healthy democracy and a healthy environment.
Latinx people in the US have a lot of political, electoral, and organizing power. And we know the fight for a more just and peaceful world doesn't end on November 3rd. It's just the beginning. So we're going to hear and learn more about that today.
Stay all the way till the end to find out how you can get involved with Greenpeace Unidex, our volunteer organizing program.
We have a very special guest today. Thea Riofrancos is the assistant professor of political science at Providence College. She co-authored the book, A Planet to Win, Why We Need a Green New Deal. And she's a powerful voice on all things Latin America, Green New Deal, and social movements across the globe. Last time I saw her, I think we were drinking pisco sours in some dive bar in Santiago, but either way, welcome, Thea.
Very nice. Welcome, Thea.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. And I remember that moment like it was yesterday, and I can't wait to go back to Santiago one day and do the same.
So in your recent amazing New York Times opinion piece, you say that never in my life have political conditions felt so ripe for change. Please tell me more about that.
Yeah, I know. It's a really weird moment to be optimistic in many ways. And I struggle with a lot of different moods throughout the day in terms of how I think about politics, right? My vision and understanding of how transformative change happens is that we need to use a lot of different tactics and modalities of kind of social transformation, right? And, so where I learned that from was Latin America, right? Because as I was just saying, there was this inspiring moments that was many years long in which you did have progressive governments. And in another book of mine that recently just came out, I explore a lot of complexities of that. So I'm not trying to paper over that those governments were perfect, but whatever. You had left-wing people in power, and then you had social movements. And I've sort of, since learning that lesson through Latin America, I've always thought you have to have both of those, right? If you just have movements and you can't get into power, there's a lot that movements can do, but they're going to face that stark limitation of the state, right? But if you are only in the state, then you're going to lose your accountability to movements, right? So there's some kind of sweet spot that's very hard to find that involves both of those elements. And right now, we don't have one big part of that in the US, which is we don't have the left in power in any kind of national sense of that, but we do have a part of that, which is that we have many more leftists in office. We have people that will say I'm a democratic socialist, or I, believe in Black Lives Matter, or I believe in a Green New Deal, that are actually elected to office, at the city level, the state level, and now many more in Congress as well. So we have part of the electoral piece. When I first came to Latin America as a student and then a scholar and as an activist, it was very clear to me that Latin America was light years ahead of the US in terms of social transformation possibilities. You had real movements exercising real leverage. You had left-wing people in office saying they were socialists and anti-imperialists. And it's we'll never have that in the belly of the beast. And weirdly, I don't want to say the positions have reversed, but you've had a kind of eclipse of that moment in Latin America. And meanwhile, in the US, for the first time in many decades, we have a large national kind of socialist organization, the Democratic Socialists of America. We have people like AOC in office, right? So again, I don't want to make a simplistic analysis, but there are ways in which that kind of movement, electoral kind of dynamic is very vibrant in the US right now, despite the fact, or maybe in some ways not unrelated to the fact, that we have this awful person in the White House, right? So I think some of that has been in response, but some of it, I don't want to overplay that it's all just a reaction to Trump, because I think, Black Lives Matter, Standing Rock, Occupy Wall Street, these are many years in the making, and they have sort of come to a head in a moment where then we have this awful person in the White House to then mobilize against. So I think, that dynamic is what gives me hope. And I think that, the more people that we have in Congress that are sympathetic to the left, the more likely it is that we get something like a Green New Deal, possibly, which would be my ultimate, political desire at the moment.
Yeah, we're right there with you. So now that we're talking a little bit about climate, we are obviously at a critical point where we can either implement policies that make the status quo worse. So we continue to use fossil fuels, we continue to extract and not, take care of our planet, or we lay the groundwork for a fairer and lower carbon economy for all. Why is the moment now, and how can we get to a future that we want?
Yeah, well, the moment is now for a lot of different reasons. I mean, on the climate science front, the moment is now because we just are at this critical juncture where, if in the next 10 years, according to the climate science, we can cut global emissions in half, we will avert like the most dramatic, worst, awful for humans and ecosystems consequences of climate change, right? So we have this timeline given to us by climate, and that by climate scientists, I should say. When we have major economic crisis layered on top of a public health crisis, we do sort of face these choices as society of like, how are we going to rebuild? How are we going to repair? How are we going to move out of this crisis? And what kind of society do we want, as the crisis hopefully hopefully we overcome the worst of the crisis. And I think those critical moments like just face us or confront us with these critical questions. And so that's why I kind of see it as a fork in the road.
I mean, I think that's so true. Like, when we talk about recovery, like we don't want to go back to normal. We don't want to go back the way it used to be, or it was, and it still is in many ways, what you call fossil fuel capitalism. So why is it so important when we talk about the Green New Deal that we talk about a tool for transforming our economy, and we talk about a just transition away from fossil fuels?
So I think there's all of these intersections, and what the Green New Deal invites us to think about is the connection between the climate crisis and inequality, right? And that inequality can be your citizenship status, it can be gender, it can be race, it can be class. It's probably the way all those things intersect, right? For you and for your family and for your community. And the more marginalized you are, the more oppressed you are, the more exploited you are in the world and in the US, the more likely you are to feel the impacts of the climate crisis, the more likely you are to be what we would call a frontline community or a frontline worker. And so the Green New Deal focuses in on inequality and the climate crisis in a way that's very different from prior paradigms of thinking about the climate crisis, which really focus just, on emissions or on this planetary atmospheric thing as if it was something like out there. Whereas, the Green New Deal shows how emissions are connected to things in our daily lives.
We are currently living in this moment of uprising. We know that protests and strikes alter the course of policy. What can we learn about our moment in history right now from the social movements in Latin America?
Latin American movements have been very ecumenical, very broad and diverse in their tactics, right? And they have really deployed a very wide array of tactics in a lot of different arenas. So it might be the neighborhood, right? So it might be let's set up a mutual aid network in our neighborhood because the government ignores us, the corporations ignore us, but we need to eat. And this is even happening, during the pandemic, even with the strictures of social distancing. So you see people caring for one another, feeding one another, redistributing resources at the neighborhood level. That's a very interesting tactic. And it's not unique to Latin America. It's around a lot of the global South, but I think it's very prevalent in Latin America. So you have that. Another that I work on a lot and that I'm very inspired by is anti-extractive movements. So that's movements that are specifically targeting fossil fuels, mining, but they also target things like mega development projects. So a big new dam is built and it displaces a lot of people, or mega agriculture. They might also target deforestation itself as an effect of extractive development. And, they are very militant. And what those movements have been able to do in many cases, and I study in Ecuador in particular, but there's other cases as well, slow down resource extraction, which is actually what we need. We need to keep it in the ground. We need to not extract so rapaciously because it's so harmful for the environment and it's not necessary for human well-being in any way. And especially around oil, we just literally need to keep it there, right? And so these movements use a lot of forms of direct action, in the sites of extraction. They also might put pressure on the government in the capital. And so they use both, they're both in rural spaces, urban spaces. They do all sorts of things to slow down extraction. And then the last thing I'll say that's inspiring about Latin American social movements kind of resonates with something I said earlier, which is that they have seen the state as a terrain of struggles, right? But I think that Latin America teaches us to look for those openings. Where can you put pressure? Where can you try to democratize the state? Where can you get left-wing, indigenous, environmental activists into power? And they've really seen the state in a very strategic way that I think actually people in the global North can actually learn from a lot.
With Biden, let's see, maybe Biden day one, that's what we're kind of rooting for. What do we want to see? Obviously, a commitment to oppose new oil, gas, and coal projects, maybe not having advisors that are affiliated with the fossil fuel industry. But what else do we need to see to really see a shift in our government in terms of the climate?
hopefully the election will go the better way, right? And then what I think we need to really focus on is those first 100 days where presidents make all these commitments and they use their executive action to do all these things. And like, there's this new moment to like frame the political conversation. And I think the left should be organizing around that moment. And absolutely what you just said are two key demands, like keep the fossil fuels in the ground. The reason it's a key demand, not just obviously the climate science, but that like Biden has vacillated on this around fracking especially. And so we need to push him on that. And then the fossil fuel advisor thing, you know, a lot of environmentalists have been coming out against like these specific figures in his transition team. And so we need to hope that they don't make it into cabinet positions. So that's another thing to organize around, which is that Biden has promised $2 trillion for something he won't call a Green New Deal because he thinks the phrase is too left-wing or whatever, but whatever. It's $2 trillion in 4 years is like not nothing. That's like the biggest economic, you know, stimulus directed at specifically renewable energy like ever, right, in the US's history. So that would be a big deal if he actually does it. Not only that, he has said 40% for frontline and disadvantaged communities. Again, it's a big question mark as to how this is going to happen, whether it's going to happen, but that's an organizing opportunity. So I think what the left should do is hold him to those commitments and maybe even push those commitments a little more. Like maybe we need more than $2 trillion.
We just want to thank you so much for shedding light on this important election and everything that we can do to keep pushing for a Green New Deal and what we can learn from Latin America. I thank you so much, Thea.
Thank you.
Thank you, Thea. I can't wait to have a piscuito with you sometime in the future.
Dude, it's going to happen. I'm like literally as soon as we're allowed to do that again, I'm there.
Okay, everybody. So let's get organized and hear from our Greenpeace Unidex team and one of our super volunteers. We have Linda Rodriguez, and she is the national mobilization organizer who runs Greenpeace's Latinx organizing program. Our other guest today is Amalia Arango, and Amalia is one of our super volunteers. So we have Linda and Amalia with us today. Hello.
Hi. How are you?
So now I want to hear a little bit more about what Greenpeace Unidex is. So Linda, can you tell us more about the program?
Great question. So Greenpeace Unidex is a team of volunteers that are helping us mobilize Latinas around the country to the polls, which is what we want them to do. We want them to empower communities. We want to take on the platform to uplift our voices, mobilize the masses to the polls, and honestly, elect a president that will fight for a just, healthy, and safe future for all.
Yes. As you know, we've been doing this a few episode series where that's exactly our point. We want to get people to vote. We want to help, get people organized so that they get their friends and families, their amigas, their tios, their abuelas to vote. My next question. Okay, Amalia, how did you get involved with Greenpeace? Like, what are some of the things you get to do as a volunteer?
I got involved because I am subscribed to Greenpeace newsletter. So I saw the announcement of the volunteering and I thought okay, this is my opportunity to make an impact on a big scale. Really what I'm doing in the volunteering is we are trying to engage potential voters to vote by sending them text messages. We are calling them.
Can you describe what it looks like when you're texting someone? Okay, I'm going to volunteer from 4 to 6 tonight. And then what does it look like when you're texting people?
Well, it's fun to know the people that engage in the texting. So there are some which engage negatively, of course, but there are some others that engage positively. And that's very exciting and that's very rewarding because you see that there's a lot of people also out there that care about the same things that you do. So that's very good. And that happened as well when you call people. Some don't answer, but some others answer, and they are very friendly, and they give you thank you for calling them and reminding them to vote. So that's very nice to have that interaction with people. That's very nice.
Why is it so important for Latinx people and for climate voters to turn out this election?
Greenpeace is stepping up to mobilize Latinas and Spanish speakers because of our communities must come together and take a stand against environmental racism, especially when pollution is affecting our communities harder than any other. Currently, this is alarming, 2 in 5 Latinos live within 30 miles of a power plant. Now think about that. That's tough to hear. And if that wasn't enough, the Trump administration has waived 41 environmental, natural resource, and land management laws in order to pursue its infamous border wall. think about that. And I don't want to keep bringing issues and talk about doom and gloom, but if you really think about this is a problem, and this is why it's so important for us to come together. So this is the perfect time to get out and vote. We need our voices to be heard because the Latino vote matters.
So I'm excited. I want to get involved. What do I do next? How can I get involved, Linda?
That's my favorite part. You should just join us. Be part of the Greenpeace Unidex team. Being able to speak Spanish is super helpful, but not necessary to mobilize Latinx voters. All you need to be is passionate about speaking of the injustices that are happening in your community. And if that's you, you should definitely join us. Or check out the link at the bottom of this video.
I'm going to do it, and I'm going to make my family do it too.
Great. So Amalia, what's fun about volunteering with Greenpeace?
Well, I enjoy a lot to make a positive impact on a large scale, like I said before, to meet other people with the same purpose that I have. That's very exciting to get to share like stories and experiences with others. It's very fun. And we have to realize that choosing our leaders is one of the most important decisions that we can make in terms of climate change, because we might do like very small things in our day-to-day, in our daily lives, but voting and choosing the leaders that are going to govern our country and at the end, the whole world ecosystem, it's very important right now in terms of climate change. So like big and impactful decisions are made by them, as we know. So being able to make sure that these leaders are chosen well and that people is like being aware about that is very important. And I feel that I am like making part of that. And I love to be part of this like big change that we are working on.
Thank you, Amalia, for all the hard work you do on the volunteer Greenpeace Unidex team. And same with you, Linda. You are a total rock star, and we love you so much. Thank you again for joining us. This was such a pleasure. And please, everybody, get out there and volunteer with Greenpeace.
All right, you heard it. It's fun, it's important, and it's urgent. Help us by reaching out to our community.
Thank you so much for joining us once again. Be sure to hit that subscribe button as always and click the link. I don't know where it is. Click the link to become a volunteer and follow us on Instagram at Greenpeace USA. See you guys.
Chaucito.